FFT Waiver Wire presented by Snickers. Rookie mistake? Maybe you just need a Snickers. Looking at the players you should be looking to add this week in fantasy, Elijah Mitchell at the top. 6 teams on buys, including the Cowboys and Bengals. So let's get some advice from Dave Richard and Jamie Eisenberg, fellas.
Thanks, Chris. Busy week on the waiver wire, as Chris alluded to. Lots of teams on a bye, 6 teams on a bye. And really the story that we've been dealing with for the last couple of weeks is the injuries. And there's a big one in San Francisco that a lot of people are looking at, Dave, and that's Christian McCaffrey. But before we get to the running backs, let's start with the quarterbacks. We did have a big injury there with Justin Fields. But here are the guys that are going to be on a bye that you're missing for week 6. The big one, probably Joe Burrow, but you also don't have Dak Prescott coming off a strong game. C.J. Stroud has been fantastic through his rookie campaign. And then those super flex and 2 quarterback league managers having to replace potentially Bryce Young and Zach Wilson. Ryan Tannehill dealing with that ankle injury. Hopefully he will be okay coming off of the bye. Again, the injuries that we're looking at the position, Justin Fields, the big one. He's going to be out for who knows how long. Hopefully Trevor Lawrence does play Thursday night against the Saints. You got Jimmy G dealing with the back injury. Sounds like he's trending in the right direction. Same thing with Daniel Jones. And it would be nice to get Deshaun Watson back for this week's game against the Colts, as it is a favorable matchup. Here are the players that you're looking to add at the quarterback position, and it does get ugly when you look at the end of this list, but starting with Tyrod Taylor on down, those are more 2 QB and super flex options. The first 3 guys, though, could be needed in 1 quarterback league, specifically Sam Howell. Now, Dave, I'm cheating a little bit here because usually we cut it off at 65%, but based on how bad this quarterback list was, I said, you know what, let's just throw Sam Howell in there because he's playing really well, and some fantasy managers might still be able to add him. So how much do you like Sam Howell taking on the Giants in week number 7?
I like it. I'm nervous because I know that he's very up and down. Just the production has been up. I think he's had 4 of his last 5 games with at least 21 fantasy points. That's a fact. It's not what I think. And I think that he's absolutely someone who's going to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback this week, even though I do expect the Giants to try and mess with him, try and blitz him a lot. We've just seen the Giants give up a lot of numbers through the air. So he's definitely my favorite on this list. Derek Carr, you have him second on this list. I agree with that. I think he's a top 12 type of quarterback. I don't have high expectations for him, but I do think that that's going to be an area of throwing the football where they can win. The Saints can win against Jacksonville on a short week.
Carr's last 2 games, his 2 best games. This shows you where he's been this season. 18.5 fantasy points. That's his best 2-game stretch, but he does have a 300-yard game.
Hopefully he can get all the way to 20. That's all we need.
Hey, get that second touchdown and he'll do it. Hopefully better series
close 2 games ago.
At the end of the game. It's been frustrating. All right, so quarterbacks you could be moving on from. Russell Wilson was completely miserable against the Chiefs, and I don't love this matchup for him against the Packers. They are top 10 in fantasy points allowed. 2 opposing quarterbacks, and I think we've seen probably the best of Russell Wilson, so hopefully you sold high on him if you were able to trade him. And Anthony Richardson, if you have an IR spot, you'll be stashing him, but it does sound like he's going to miss the remainder of the season with that shoulder injury, and so just keep in mind if he does come back, you want to have him, but right now not looking very promising. As we move now to the running backs, this is the position everybody's going to be concerned about because look at the players we have on a bye. No Pollard, no Hall, no Henry, no Mixon, no Pierce. That might be a good thing because you don't have to start him. No Sanders, no Hubbard. Hubbard, somebody you want to carry through his bye week if you ever pick him up. Same thing with Tyjae Spears. Dalvin Cook, however, somebody you could be moving on from, as we will show you. The injuries at the position, oh my God. This is like an all-star team. Christian McCaffrey, hopefully he plays, but we don't know. David Montgomery going to miss some time. We hope to get Jahmyr Gibbs back, but not looking good for Kyren Williams or Ronnie Rivers. Sanders on a bye, so don't worry about him. Devon Achane not going to play, still on IR. Maybe Jeff Wilson does come back. Hopefully Aaron Jones comes back. He's coming off of his bye. And the other guys here, James Conner, Khalil Herbert, the ones of interest, they are on injured reserve. All right, let's talk about the running backs to add here, Dave, because this is the big story and who you're looking to pick up. So we got the 2 guys in San Francisco. You got the running back, Zach Evans for the Rams, and then potentially Craig Reynolds, who you could be looking at as a replacement option in Detroit. Kareem Hunt's doing a nice job, at least he did last week coming off the bye for the Browns. And lo and behold, it was not Amari DiMercado for the Cardinals. It was Keontae Ingram and Damian Williams splitting the work there. But let's talk about the San Francisco situation. So Jordan Mason was the better of the 2 guys between him and Elijah Mitchell against the Browns after McCaffrey left the game. But Kyle Shanahan sort of indicated, not fully, but sort of indicated that Mitchell is still the number 2 guy on the depth chart. So if you're trying to pick up the replacement for Christian McCaffrey, which direction are you going?
I'm going with the guy that Kyle Shanahan wants to go with, and it sounds like he wants to go with Elijah Mitchell. And Mitchell's the one that has the experience. You remember him from last season, the year before. He had some good fantasy production, became a waiver wire superstar, and I think he's going to be right back in that spot this week. I don't think he's going to get every single snap, but I think he'll lead the way for San Francisco, and he's played way more snaps inside the 10 than Jordan Mason has over their short career. So I think he's the one you go after first. And then I'm not even sure if Mason's second, because Zach Evans has an opportunity to do what Kyren Williams did, and that's take advantage of a really good opportunity in LA. And if he can do that and he can catch some passes, then he might be the second best one and the one that I'd rather have instead of Jordan Mason, who might only touch the ball 8 times for the 49ers against Minnesota.
All right, so, but just in terms of Mason, though, because he's clearly more available than Mitchell, are you trying to add Mason even if Mitchell's taken in your league? Are you trying to add Mason? Let's just say you can't get Zach Evans, your second on waivers. Are you putting a claim for Mason knowing that he could still be the guy in San Francisco because of what we saw last week?
You know that he's going to play. It's just a matter of how much he'll be able to do. And I actually do believe in this Vikings defense. They have started to play well over the last couple weeks, and they're catching the 49ers at the right time. If there's no McCaffrey and if there's no Deebo Samuel, and obviously both of those guys missing are huge for the run game there, if those guys aren't there, I think the Vikings defense might be able to hang with the 49ers.
Couple things just to keep in mind. Remember, they do play Monday night, so we may not get an update on McCaffrey's status until Thursday, so don't go crazy with your fab just yet. You might have to just make sure you get him, but you may be overspending because McCaffrey could still play, and Deebo Samuel is going to kind of swing this a little bit. If there is no Samuel, the running game in San Francisco for the running backs will be better. If Samuel does play, then clearly he'll get some touches in the backfield as well. All right, Dave sort of gave you a little taste of what Zach Evans can do, but this is a good situation for the Rams because Kyren Williams, it's a bad situation for the Rams. It's a good situation for fantasy managers to find somebody off the waiver wire because the Rams have done a great job running the ball with Kyren Williams. 4 of 6 games so far, 17 or more PPR points. So I don't think you should expect Zach Evans, who just played his first, he just got his first opportunity to play last week, to do that. But again, Ronnie Rivers is out for the foreseeable future, and Williams is not expected to play in Week 7. So is Zach Evans a must-start running back for you this week, knowing what the scenario is of the position?
And the 6 teams on bye. There's just so much going on at running back that it kind of pushes Zach Evans up into that role. But I don't know if he's going to be the only guy. They've got Royce Freeman also on the roster. That's a veteran who's been around the league for a few years. Evans is just the hot young name that they've got. Whoever gets that opportunity might be able to come through with 10 fantasy points. It's not a high bar at all. At best, a low-end number 2 type of running back.
And you're looking at the Steelers and saying, oh my God, I got to stay away from them. They actually give up the 23rd most fantasy points to the position. So we could have some success.
A lot of that was early on in the year, though. They have gotten better over the last few weeks.
That is true. We did see, you know, but Jerome Ford had the big run. Nick Chubb did some damage against them, and Christian McCaffrey did as well. The running backs that you're moving on from this week, if you have to, again, you don't necessarily have to drop all these guys, but we went nuts for Amari DiMercato last week, and the Cardinals did not. They leaned on Keontae Ingram and Damian Williams. So even though DiMercato played the most snaps, he did not have the most production, so you could drop him. Cam Akers, if you want to hold him as a handcuff to Alexander Mattison, I get it. Dalvin Cook has completely been supplanted by Breece Hall and even got passed by Michael Carter as the number 2 running back. And Samaje Perine now part of a 3-headed monster. I don't think you want to trust him, especially now that he's injured. Wide receivers that we're looking at now, and here are the guys that are on a bye. Again, 6 teams that are missing. So CeeDee Lamb had his best game. Now you can't use him. Jamar Chase, going to be hard not to have him in your lineup. Adam Thielen, what a stud he's been. He's on a bye. Same with Garrett Wilson, same with Nico Collins, and same with DeAndre Hopkins. So a lot of star power missing at the position as well. The big injury that we're looking at here for wide receivers is Deebo Samuel. Hopefully he'll be out there. Chris Olave, I think more of a procedural thing because the game is Thursday. Juju should be able to return from the concussion protocol. And then you see some of the guys that are on IR. Good news, though, is Deontay Johnson is expected to play. Dave, is he a must-start wide receiver now that he's back?
As a number 3 receiver in PPR, I'd put him in there. But eventually, he could be a number 2 wide receiver. If he's still out there on the waiver wire in your shallow leagues, make him the priority.
72% rostered as of Tuesday. Let's look at the wide receivers that we're looking to add for this week. And again, Deontay Johnson would lead the list if he's available. But you got some young guys on this list, Dave, that are playing very well. Josh Downs has been great with Gardner Minshew, 13.1 PPR points or more in the last 3 appearances with Minshew. Wan'Dale Robinson coming off his best game. It was with Tyrod Taylor, not Daniel Jones, so take that into account. And Rashee Rice has been 10.1 PPR points or more in 4 of 6 games. Not exactly a huge ceiling, but certainly a nice floor. So of these 3 guys, I guess let's just go in order here. Let's talk about Josh Downs. So what do you think about his performance last week against the Jaguars, and what about his matchup this week against Cleveland?
I think he's locked in as a number 3 receiver in PPR. Kind of the same thing that we just said for Deontay Johnson. I don't think he's got the same type of ceiling as Deontay Johnson, but I think that volume will be there for him week in and week out. Kind of look at him to get 5 catches a week, and what he does with it could be 50 yards, could be what he did last week. He scored a touchdown, but he didn't even have 30 yards in the game. Somewhere in between, but that's at least 10 full PPR points per game. I like where he's at there. He's my my favorite wide receiver to get if you need somebody for week number 7.
Let's talk about Wan'Dale Robinson again. Great game against the Bills. Had 8 targets, caught all 8 of them. He hasn't exactly had a huge game yet, but he's been building towards something, coming back from the ACL tear, and we know that this Giants offense is just looking for anybody to be a playmaker right now. Is he your favorite Giants receiver rest of season?
I think I have to say yes to that because he's the most likely to catch the most passes week in and week out. And so I don't know what he's going to do with them each week. I think he'll be below 10 yards per catch the rest of the way. But this coaching staff drafted him. They have a vision for him. He's a short area target, an alternative to the run game, basically, because Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor, or whoever it is, can just throw short to him. I wouldn't expect him to score very often. But he's in that 9 to 11 PPR point range. Not as high of a ceiling as Josh Downs.
Okay, so not the 13-point game, but you did just see 8 for 62, so hopefully that's something you can build off of as the Giants have a favorable matchup for the first time in a long time against the Washington Commanders. And let's talk about Rajee Rice real quick because, again, the Chiefs need somebody in this receiving core to step up. He seems like the most likely candidate because Kadarius Toney's been very inconsistent. Sky Moore has disappeared. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is who he is. Is Rajee Rice ever going to get to the point where you feel comfortable starting him?
I think he can. I think he can eventually be a low-end wide receiver, too. It might not be until December when it happens, but he's somebody, if I can be patient, just for a few weeks, I'd stash Rashee Rice. And if I'm patient and I don't need a wide receiver this week, I'd prioritize him ahead of Josh Downs.
Okay, understood. Let's talk about them tight ends now and who are the guys that we're missing for this week. I'm sorry, let's look at the wide receivers that we're dropping. I always do that. Let's look at the wide receivers we're moving on from. I don't want to be negative. I don't want to drop guys. Tutu Atwell.
I'm ready to drop all 3 of these guys.
Yeah, it's been frustrating. The one at the end, though, is the one that I think a lot of people look at and say, do I really want to hold him because there's a lot of upside? Well, we've seen 2 games now without Mike Williams, and it's been a lot of downside, unfortunately, for Quentin Johnson. He's running a lot of routes. He's just not getting a lot of targets. But Jahan Dotson, 1 target, no catches last week, and Tutu Atwell, we know Cooper Kupp back. That hasn't been good. The tight ends that you're looking at are on a bye. Jake Ferguson, I don't know if you need to hold him, but you might want to just because he's been open a lot. Dak Prescott just not hitting him. Dalton Schultz should absolutely be rostered. He's come on the last 3 weeks. And the rest of the guys you could probably move on from here as they go on their bye. But Schultz should absolutely be rostered, and if he's available, go pick him up. The injuries at the position for this coming week that we're looking at, Kincaid should clear the concussion protocol. Freiermuth says he's going to be back. The rest of the guys have really become irrelevant. Sean Payton saying they might have rushed Greg Dulcich back a little bit too soon from his hamstring injury, but we're not going to see him most likely in week 7. Here are the guys that you're looking to add. And Dave, let's talk about Freiermuth real quick, but just to give you up to date for everybody looking at the younger tight ends here in terms of Musgrave and Michael Mayer. We heard some rumblings out of Las Vegas that the Raiders want to get Mayer going. You saw that 6 targets, 5 catches, 75 yards against the Patriots. And Musgrave now, his last 2 healthy games, he did leave week 4 with a concussion. His last 2 healthy games, 6 catches for each of those matchups. So Pat Freiermuth, though, coming back from his hamstring injury, do you like the outlook for him taking on the Rams and moving forward?
Not as much as I like it for Michael Mayer. I think Michael Mayer's the one, if you're trying to move forward with a tight end, that's the one that I target. I love his target share over the last couple of games. It's at least 19% in each of his last 2. I think the Raiders are trying to make something work with him. I think the fact that they might not be with Garoppolo this week could actually help Mayer because he's an easy short area outlet, and he's a big dude who can make some plays after the catch. So I like him the best. I want to go off the board for a second. There's a name you didn't have on your list. I'm curious about this one. Jonnu Smith with Atlanta. 3 straight games with at least 10 PPR points. Is he somebody that fantasy managers should add? He's out there in over 80% of leagues.
Yeah, I mean, he should have been, yeah. He's been very productive. I guess I just, overlooked the fact that we've been talking about him for the last 3 weeks and, how much we continue to bring him up. But yeah, for sure, he should be on the list, absolutely.
But I'm looking at tight ends. When I saw the list of tight ends that were available, I wanted somebody who had long-term appeal. To me, Mayer is at the top of that list.
All right, some guys you might be moving on from for week 7 to add a Michael Mayer or a Luke Musgrave or a Pat Freiermuth, Tyler Higbee, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, just not getting the job done. They might do it again, but right now they should be dropped in your fantasy leagues. Make sure you check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast. Wherever podcasts are found, we help you dominate your leagues. Check it out, the Fantasy Football Today podcast.